Hello everyone, and welcome back. Or if this is your first time visiting, welcome. For those of you that have seen some of my other videos, you know I normally just take the time to tie a few patterns and walk you through the steps of doing those flies. But here I'm going to do something different than what I normally do. I'm going to create a series of videos for the beginner. These would be intended for someone not having any knowledge of fly tying, and maybe they've been fly fishing for a little while and are thinking about taking it up, but they really don't know where to get started. Or if you've done a little bit of research, but you still would like to see a little bit more or have a different perspective on just shooting for your own stuff, like looking through a catalog or something like that, then these videos will be for you. In this video, I'm going to take you through some of the tools that I like to use for tying my flies. And I'm going to focus on the essentials that you need. So there's all kinds of tools that you can use in fly tying, but in this video I want to kind of cut out the optional or kind of nonsense tools, so to speak. I'm going to stick with the meat and potatoes, what you need, that you will need to tie a fly. Almost every fly out there. So let's get started. The first tool that you're going to want to use is this guy. It's called a bobbin. It's actually got a spool of thread in it right now, so I'll go ahead and take that out. But that's the tool itself. It's called a bobbin. And all it is, it's a simple tool with a wire frame with a tube soldered to it, and it has two composite material feet for holding the spool. Now sometimes on this model here, these are composite feet, like made out of plastic, but sometimes they can be made out of brass. One or the other, doesn't really matter. It's your personal preference. If it's going to be my bet, if you stick to ones that have the composite feet, they're probably going to be a little bit cheaper than what the brass will be. As far as quality or durability, there's not really much to write home there about. I've had this particular bobbin probably going on 7 or 8 years, if not more, and you can see that they're not even wanting to give way or spin or do anything funny. It's still in great shape. But when you do get a bobbin, one thing that you might want to consider is having one like this, where the inside of the tube, I'll try to bring it in a little bit closer there, where the inside of the tube has a ceramic lining on the inside. And what this does is, instead of having just the bare metal that sometimes has burrs on it or you can't quite get a smooth finish on as the ceramic, it protects the end of your thread so you don't nick it and potentially cut it off. So this is one quality I like to have in my bobbins. I like it to have a smooth tube on the inside that'll prevent you from unnecessary thread nicks and cuts. To operate this tool, what you're going to do is you're just going to take your spool of thread and put it on one of the feet and bend the other foot over it until it snaps into place. Now the thing that is really interesting about this is, if you notice, you already have some preset tension on the thread, or on that thread spool. And that keeps the spool from freewheeling on you, so to speak. So you can just let it hang when you're tying a fly. Like if you come to a stopping point, you can just stop and let it hang there, and it's not going to unravel. You can adjust the tension on any bobbin by simply getting a pair of pliers and adjusting this bend right here. You can see where it bends up. You can just bend that in a little bit more and you'll get more tension. Most of the time you don't have to do that, but should you have a bobbin that just holds the thread spool loose, that's one way that you can adjust it to where it'll work and put the proper amount of tension onto the thread spool. Now, as far as threading this bobbin, I like to put my spool of thread in there like you see here, and you need to make sure that you're not wrapped around the wire frame. You can see that this one's not. The thread just comes straight down off the spool. And then what I like to do is pull off maybe about a foot or 10 inches, foot, somewhere between 10 inches and a foot. It's pretty good, about like that, off of the bobbin. And then I'm going to take the end of the thread and poke it through the tube. Once I get it to that point, I just grab the end of that thread and pull it the rest of the way through. Simple as that. Now, one thing you have to watch out for here, and I've done it this time, is you see your thread wraps around the wire frame. Now, you don't have to unthread it because you got enough slack out here. So all you have to do is just pull that one little bit and then wrap it back around the spool, and it comes undone. So there's that. And then you can hold it in your hand by the tube between your thumb and forefinger like that, and kind of put a little bit of tension on the thread from this end, and then just spin the spool to pull up all that slack. And then I like to stop where I've got about something like that, about 1 inch to 2 inch worth of thread sticking out the end. That's just enough for me to start the thread onto the hook. So anyway, that's the bobbin, and I can guarantee you're going to use this 100% of the time on any fly that you tie, regardless of the fly. So a necessary tool, and make sure you get a good one, or at least one that you're happy with. I also like to keep another bobbin, a spare bobbin on hand for lead wire. And the reason why I like to keep one for lead wire specifically is it cuts down on the amount of lead wire you use on a hook. So like if I just had it straight off the bobbin like this, and I just pulled, I'm just going to, I'd be guesstimating on how much I need, and I would end up pulling off way more than what I needed for the fly. Now that's okay because you can reuse it, yeah, but if you're like me, sometimes you get clumsy or forget that you did it or something. Anyway, you end up losing that spare piece. So then you just pretty much wasted it. And this is just a little thing that helps me control the amount of lead wire I'm putting on my hooks. So I can just leave it in there like that, do it just like thread, start, make my wraps around the hook shank however far I need, and that's that. The next tool that we have are scissors. And I pulled 3 pair there. Does that mean you had to have 3 pair of scissors? No, it does not. But there are 3 basic types of scissors that I use in my tying. And the first pair are these right here. And they're just a straight tipped pair of scissors. They come to a point and they're real sharp. One feature I like all my scissors to have are these wide open loops like that. And the reason why I like those is I like to put that loop around my ring finger, and when I tie with my scissors in my hand. That way I'm not fumbling around around my desk or around my bench looking for my scissors and trying to take the time down to pick them up and set them down all the time. They're just always right there in my hand, and they're handy. But yeah, it's just one of the qualities I like my scissors to have. Scissors, again, I can guarantee you will use these on 100% of the flies that you tie. So make sure that these are a good pair and a pair that you're happy with, that suit your needs. Continuing on with the scissors, the next style that I like to have are these. They're basically the same thing. They still come to a point at the end, but if you notice, they have this nice curve put into them, ever so slight. I mean, it's not like it's a huge curve. It's just, a nice little gradual curve. And I like to use these on on smaller flies and on dry flies around the hook eye, because it kind of helps me, it allows me to get these in there a little bit tighter and make sure I don't snip any of my hackle off. So, and they're real easy for me to use and operate, so I like having them on hand. Between straight tipped and curved tip scissors, that will be your preference. You may find that you don't like curved tips. That's fine. Stick to what you like. That's what I do. I stick to the ones I like. I like to have straight and I like to have curved, so I have both of them. And then this last pair, there's nothing special about this last pair whatsoever. It's still a straight tip scissor, but these are an older pair. They may not look like it because I've taken pretty good care of them, but they're an older pair, and the tip area and various parts of the blade are real dull now. So instead of just trashing them and getting rid of them, I kept this pair so I could use it to cut things like lead wire, just straight off on the end. Since these scissors are already dull and I can't use them on other materials like, say, peacock herl, or maybe even some hackle stems or bucktail, because they'll actually bind the material instead of cut it, I just transferred them over, and now I use them for things like lead wire, and here's another example up here. Let's see if I can get it off there. Some ultra wire or copper wire. Just something that I don't want to use my normal scissors on to beat them up on. So I call this third pair my beater scissors. I can cut all the tougher materials with these and not feel bad about it. So if you don't have an old pair of scissors like this, you can go to Walmart and pick you up a cheap pair of Fiskars, a reasonably cheap pair of Fiskars, and they will do just as good a job, which is what I have here. So for our next tool, as I put these up, will be a pair of hackle pliers. Now, hackle pliers I have in two different styles, and I'm mainly doing this for your benefit, just to show you that there's some options out there. I don't really like one over the other per se, but there are two different styles, and either style will work and produce the results that you're looking to achieve. This will just basically boil down to preference as far as which style that you choose. But one thing, you can both see that they have one thing in common. They both have a wire frame, and they're both spring-loaded. Let's see there how I open the jaws and they bounce back. They're spring-loaded. Same thing with these, spring-loaded. So it's one continual piece of wire that's been bent into this shape in both cases. But when they do the bending, I like for the loop, or what I'm going to call the loop, back on this end, I like it to be wide enough to where I can get my finger in there. And sometimes it's a safeguard for me, because if you hold them like this and try to wrap with them, sometimes, especially if you have a very fine stem feather, you can snap that feather right off. So if you hold them on your finger right like that to do your wrapping, you can control exactly how much tension that you're putting on that feather a little bit better. And it kind of helps as a guide, to helps you guide it around the hook shank a little bit better. So that's the two styles that there are there. If there's one feature that I will say is pretty nice to have, is like what this pair has. So they got this nice rubber pad on the other jaw. This end's a little brass insert, but this end's a nice rubber pad. And what that does is it provides cushion to your feather stem when you clamp it. So it's taking pressure off the feather stem, and you don't have to worry about snapping a feather off quite as much. So it's a nice feature to have. But if you happen to either already have, or if you're looking at getting, or you have ordered a pair of hackle pliers like these, where it's just the bare metal jaws like these are, you can rest assured that you could use, take a little bit of sandpaper, you know, and rough up that chrome finish some, and Plastidip the ends of it, or any other type of rubber adhesive coating. Just put that on the end there, and then you'll have the exact same effect as this little rubber pad that came on this pair. Just a small little tip there, or trick if you want to try it out. I've tried it before and it works. I get great results with it. I wish I had a pair on hand to show you, but I don't. Anyway, that's Hackle Pliers, and you will use these probably about 95% of the time on all your flies that have a hackle in them. Sometimes I choose not to wrap with Hackle Pliers. It just kind of depends on my mood, and it probably will depend on your mood as well. But you will use them, and they're worth having in your tooling arsenal. For your next pair, or excuse me, for your next tool that you're going to want to have, you're going to want to have one of these. And this is called a bodkin. Now, all a bodkin is a needle or a sharp point object with a handle on the end of it. So you got a sharp point on this end and a handle to hold it on this end. And you primarily use this guy to tease out dubbin fibers or apply head cement. That's the two basic uses that you have for this guy. Now you can find some others, like I know some other tires out there personally that use it as a guide for their half hitches, because it has the needle tapers down to that nice point. They use the taper to guide in their half hitch. So you could use it for making your knots as well, but I kind of mostly use it for applying head cement or teasing out dubbin fibers. A good tool to have. You don't necessarily have to have one specifically like this that has a handle on it. You can get a cheaper version that comes in packs of 3 or 5 from a craft store, and it's just a giant needle that looks like this. This is called a darning needle, and typically it's used for heavier crafting materials like yarn or twine, something of that sort, to stitch with, crochet with, I don't know, whatever they like to use it for. But I use it as a cheap alternative to a bodkin. And like I said, you'll get a pack of, you can get them in packs of 3, packs of 5. There may be even some kind of thing on the internet where you can get them in bulk if you need to. But if you look, it's about the same size as this other like actual bodkin in my right hand. You can look, they're about the same length and the same size, and let me tell you, you get about the same results for them. So this is your choice. Sometimes it's nice to have a matching set of tools, so to speak, so you might want to keep that in mind. Or if it doesn't really bother you, you want to save a few bucks, go this route. I happen to keep both of them on hand for this reason only. I like to use the darning needle over here primarily for my head cements, and I don't like to use my bodkin for them. I like to use my bodkin just for small work around the fly, like teasing out dubbin fibers or removing trapped hackle guards. You know, like maybe I made some thread wraps and trapped some hackle barbs underneath the thread wraps. I like to take this guy and stick it in there and pull them out. So I don't really want head cement or built up head cement, dried head cement on my bodkin needle that I use for that. Kind of gets annoying a little bit, but builds up too much bulk and you can't quite get into places that you need to get into, or it maybe the head cement dried a little sharp and you cut materials, so it can cause trouble. So that's where the darning needle comes into play, and I devote it and it alone to the head cement, so I don't have to worry about build up on my other bodkin. Your choice on that. personal preference. But 2 options for you to choose from. Next, we have a tool called a hair stacker. Now this is a very useful tool in the world of fly tying. And most of them that you get are going to come in 2 pieces like that right there. So on the left you'll have a base, and on the right over here you'll have a flared tube. This tube happens to be brass, but they're made out of other materials as well. Not really much going on this end. If you get one, pay attention to the size of this tube and funnel. It's going to determine the amount of hair that you can stack. So you can see when I hold this up to the camera lens, that's probably getting close to about a 1/2 inch inside diameter on that tube. Maybe not quite that much, but that's also equivalent to the amount of deer hair or calf tail or buck tail or yada yada yada. Whatever material I happen to be using, that's as much as I can possibly put in it, is the inside diameter of that tube. So they come in several different styles as far as that goes, and sizes. This one happens to have a round base with a knurled area on it so you can grip it. You'll use this for straightening the tips of materials like bucktail, elk hair, deer hair, moose hair, any type of hoofed animal like that you can think of that has antlers is primarily what you'll use this guy for. I'm going to give you an example of how this works. So I've already got some elk hair on the inside there, and I'm just going to get it out and put it in my hand, kind of bounce it around a little bit so those tips get uneven a little bit, and then I'm just going to grab it up, kind of show you what I got going on here. So when I grab it up, you'll notice that each one of those little elk hair fibers, each individual one, the tips of them are uneven. So when you go to make a wing on a dry fly or a collar on a streamer, it's not going to look very neat. You're going to have tips of varying length, right, sticking off the end of it or in the middle of it or wherever you're tying it in at. So what you would want to do is you'd want to take your hair stacker and get your elk hair and place it in your hair stacker tip down, just like I'm doing here, and just let it drop straight in. From there, you just want to take it. I primarily hold the base between my middle finger and thumb like this, and then I take my index finger and hold the tube in place. And you can even cap over the opening of the tube if you choose. It's a personal preference kind of thing. You just hold that tube in place and you give it a few taps. Right like that. Now, for most people, this will be too loud if you have family members or a wife, kids, sleeping kids for that matter, and they hear that little tapping sound. They'll get annoyed with it. So if this is the case, one way that you can get around that is just take the heel of your palm on the opposite hand, this area right here where the meat is, and then just quietly tap it on the side like that, and you'll get the same results. And hear how much quieter that is? You definitely wouldn't have to worry about waking anybody up. So you can tie all night long. So after you've aligned your tips, what you're going to want to do is turn it on the side. Don't go all the way flat. Leave a little bit of an angle on it so your hair doesn't fall out the tube in. And carefully slide that tube right out of the base. Now when I hold this up here, you can see, look at how even the tips are of that elk hair. Look at how straight and even those are. So now what you can do is carefully grab them by the tips, pull them right out, do a quick swap over, and now you have nice even elk hair tips that are ready to tie in. So we'll put those guys back in there. I'll use them later. Set it over here to the side. And for your final material, or tool I should say, I called it a material, but for your final tool that you'd like to have on hand is a quality fly tying head cement. Now head cement can come in many forms. You can even, for the time being, like if you're just getting started, you can even go to a box brand store, a big box store like Walmart, and cruise their super glue aisle and find something that'll work. As long as it's got a fine tip applicator to where you're not going to get it all over your fly, you can pretty much use any type of super glue that you want. And you're probably going to have good results with it. All you're talking about binding is like a silk thread, like this, you know, where you've knotted off your fly, and not anything overly technical like metal or something like that. So yeah, super glue works just fine. Now there's one stipulation that I like to have on whether I'm using head cement or super glue or whatever adhesive. There's one stipulation I do like to have, and that's that it be water based, not to be confused with water soluble. Don't use water soluble for obvious reasons, right? You're going to get it wet, and then it's going to, even after it cures, you're going to get it wet and it's going to dissolve right out, and it defeats the purpose. So stay away from water soluble stuff. But on the flip side, water based simply means that should you spill some, like, you know, sitting on your desk, whoops, you have an accident, you spill some. What that means is you can go wet a wash rag, maybe with warm water, maybe just a little bit of soap or whatever, and come back to your tying area and just wipe it right up off the bench, and it's not going to leave any trace behind. You're going to clean it up, no problem, as long as it hadn't cured. So that's one trait that I like my head cements to have. Another one is like this one. You can see it's got a built-in applicator. Just a little brush on the end. I like that. It helps me really control the amount that I put on my flies, and it's a nice little feature that I like to have. But again, that's your personal preference and what you choose. Another option that you have outside of actual fly tying head cement and super glue is clear fingernail polish. Clear fingernail polish works great, especially when you're doing streamer flies where you really want a glossy head on the end of it. Fingernail polish is kind of the way to go on that. Clear, I'm going to stress the clear there, clear fingernail polish. The only thing that I would be careful on when using it is just make sure you have a bottle of fingernail polish remover to go along with it, because it is not water based, and you're going to want something to cut that and clean it up off your tying area should you spill some. Well, anyway, that about wraps it up for this video. That's 6 tools that I would recommend you have. Now some of you might be saying, well, what about a vise? Yeah, you're right, you need a vise as well. However, I feel the vise is so important, I'm going to devote my next video strictly to that vise and go through and talk about different types of vices and give you a few pointers on there as far as what you want to look for in a quality vise. But if you stuck with me this long, I appreciate you watching. Be sure to check out some of my other videos where I'm tying flies and talking about other stuff fly fishing related. I've even got a few videos up of some times where I've went fishing. Be sure to check those out, like them, subscribe to my channel if you like what I'm producing, and don't forget to leave comments behind. I really enjoy having the feedback on it, and it helps me kind of gauge on what I need to improve on or where I need to go with my videos from this point. But as far as this series goes, I'm pretty excited about it. I hope I'm reaching someone out there that's interested in getting into fly tying, or if you're already into fly tying, I hope you're just as pumped and just as interested. So just be sure to like and subscribe and check out some of my other videos, and stay tuned. And as always, thanks for watching.